Welcome to my chow line. This Memorial Day, we honor the fallen heroes of the 3rd Special Forces Group. Today, we remember Sergeant First Class William R. Brown. Sergeant First Class William R. Brown, born in White Settlement, Texas, was a warrior and family man. Enlisting in 1994, he served with the 75th Ranger Regiment before earning his Special Forces tab. As a weapons sergeant with 1st Battalion, 3rd Special Forces Group, he led with courage. A father of young children, he loved video games and his brother-in-arms. On November 6, 2006, in Kandahar's Panjwai district, Brown was killed by an IED during Operation Medusa, a mission to drive out the Taliban. His sacrifice saved lives and upheld freedom. Let's honor Sergeant First Class Brown this Memorial Day by living with his courage. Welcome to my chow line, where we salute the heroes who define courage. This Memorial Day, 2025, we're honoring 2 Air Force legends, Captain Jerry Lind and Major David Mike McGuire, who gave their lives to save a village in England. Gear up and let's pay tribute to their sacrifice. On September 17, 1992, Captain Jerry Lind, a 28-year-old pilot from Akron, Ohio, and Major David Mike McGuire, a 37-year-old navigator, were flying in an F-111 E-Type during a routine training mission out of the RAF Upper Heyford, Oxfordshire. A total hydraulic failure left the jet uncontrollable. Despite orders to eject, Jerry and Mike stayed with the aircraft, steering it away from the villages of Upper Heyford and North Aston. The plane crashed through the base fence and their escape pod failed, killing both men. Their selfless act saved countless civilian lives. Jerry was a member of Marlborough Red Methodist Church in Banbury, a pilot who connected with the community. His father, Leonard, thanked the villagers for their support after the crash, saying their prayers brought comfort. Mike's wife, Kathy, stood proud at a 2012 memorial service carrying his love forward. The people of Upper Heyford still honored them with a cemetery memorial that reads, "God bless from all of your friends." Brigadier General John Quintus, who knew them, called their sacrifice unforgettable. These were men who lived for others. Jerry Lind and Mike McGuire didn't just fly. They chose to save strangers, trading their lives for a village's safety. Their heroism lives in Upper Heyford's gratitude and in the Air Force's pride. This Memorial Day, we remember their courage, their choice, and the legacy they left behind. Hello and welcome to my chow line. As we approach Memorial Day, we pay tribute to Chief Warrant Officer 2nd Stanley L. Harriman, a hero of the 3rd Special Forces Group. Stanley L. Harriman, born in Springfield, Missouri in 1967, joined the Army as a combat engineer, serving in Desert Storm and Haiti. After earning his Special Forces qualification, he joined 3rd Special Forces Group. A member of multiple ODAs, he was a fitness enthusiast and devoted father to Darby, Stanley, Christopher, and Jessica, and cherished by his wife, Sheila. On March 2, 2002, in Afghanistan, Chief Warrant Officer Harriman was killed in action during Operation Enduring Freedom. His leadership shaped the fight against the Taliban. This Memorial Day, we remember CW2 Harriman's sacrifice. Support our veterans in this honor. Welcome to my chow line, where we honor the brave who gave everything. This Memorial Day 2025, we're saluting a North Dakota hero, Captain Jeffrey John Olson, an Air Force legend who sacrificed his life during Operation Desert Storm. Lock and load, and let's pay tribute to a true warrior. Born April 5th, 1963, Jeffrey John Olson was a proud son of North Dakota. A standout in the Air Force Academy's class of '86, Jeff became a radar navigator on a B-52G model. Guiding his crew through chaos of Operation Desert Storm, his role was critical, ensuring bombs hit their targets to weaken Iraqi forces. On February 3rd, 1991, Jeff's B-52, tail number 59-2593, was returning to Diego Garcia after a grueling mission. An electrical system failure sent the plane crashing into the Indian Ocean, 3,200 miles southeast of Baghdad. Jeff, alongside Major James Weaver and Captain Tony Geishauser, didn't make it. At just 27, he gave his life for our victory. Jeff was the heart of his B-52 crew, likely sharing laughs and grit with his brothers in arms. As an Academy grad, he trained with the best, forging bonds that lasted beyond the cockpit. His North Dakota roots made him a hometown hero. Mourned by a community that still feels his loss, his memorial at the Air Force Academy stands tall, inscribed with Operation Desert Storm, a testament to his courage. We don't have his family's words, but we know Jeff's sacrifice helped bring our troops home. Jeff Olson wasn't just a navigator, he was a leader, a brother, a North Dakotan who flew into history. His final mission helped crush the enemy, paving the way for peace. This Memorial Day, we remember his steady hands, his fearless spirit, and the price he paid for freedom. To Captain Jeffrey John Olson and family, thank you so much for your sacrifice. This Memorial Day, we honor you by sharing your story.
Welcome to SCIF. I appreciate you joining us today on this Memorial Day 2025. You know, one of the fondest memories I have with my boys is taking them as young kids to a local Memorial Day service, and just to see the respect in their eyes was really something to see, something to behold. I would encourage you to do that. If you have young kids, find a local Memorial Day service today. Even if you're just by yourself, take your wife, take your kids, take your dog, just go there and pay respects. You know, they're usually around the one of the American Legion or the VFW or whatever. You can find them there, but just check your local paper. I'm sure you can find a service to go. Just to honor the guys and women who have laid down their lives for the American Republic. And you know, they're just instruments. It's not their fault that our government's been corrupt and that we've been in these forever wars for different darker agendas, but their courage and their heroism need to be honored, their bravery. So please do that today. Say hello to the crew. Thanks for joining us today on this Memorial Day. We have a treat for you today. We're going to have two interviews I've done on war stories, one with Major Drew Dix, U.S. Army Medal of Honor winner in Vietnam. Fantastic, amazing interview. He's still serving the nation today. And then also Captain G. Dog Pearson from the U.S. Navy. 2 interviews, which I think you'll really enjoy. All of these war stories are on our military channel, armedforces.press, AFP, and you can find them on AFP Pods under War Stories if you go to armedforces.press. And I want to give a shout out to our AFP contributor, Tracy Lingle at My Chowline. Please follow him on YouTube. He's got a great channel, puts out some great content, and we're happy and proud to have him on AFP and on CDM.press as a contributor to our efforts on our military channel, armedforces.press. So please follow him on YouTube at My Chowline. With that, I'm going to bring in the first interview, which is Major Drew Dix from Vietnam, and I really hope you enjoy this. So we're honored today to be joined by our first Medal of Honor recipient here on War Stories. Quite a treat and a real honor. Major Drew Dix from U.S. Army, who was involved in the Tet Offensive. Sir, thanks for coming on.
Good to be here, Todd.
So we're going to talk about several things. I want to hear your war stories, but let's start with the Center for American Values. Tell us about that, why you started it, and then we'll get into the good stuff.
Well, I'm glad you asked, because the Center for American Values is very dear to me, and co-founded with Brad Padula from Pueblo here. Mm-hmm. And about 14 years ago, 14 years this November coming up. And, you know, we felt that there was a need that the young people were losing sight of what created this country and the sacrifices that were made, not just from the founders of our country, but for those that served in the military and did other things in their life. And, you know, you can see the gallery here. We've got 166 portraits of Medal of Honor recipients that we started in 1999. I knew every one of these guys, great people.
Wow.
And we used the Medal of Honor to show to young people that at a critical time in their life, they can make a decision, and to make the right decision benefits everyone. To make a sacrifice can benefit everyone, and it's long lasting. And so that's given us some legs into the mission. That's more important now than ever, because we're losing touch with what built this republic. And we've got to remember the past. The present has to remember the past, because if you don't, your future is in doubt.
Very true. So tell us about what the center does. What are your activities, and how do you reach down and touch the younger generations?
Well, first thing is we're open 7 days a week in this gallery on the Riverwalk in Pueblo. It's a beautiful place, as you can probably see. And then we've got a cadre of educators that welcome classes that come in here, and from the local communities, and sometimes it's up from Denver and Colorado Springs, other places, and out east of here in some of the more rural areas. But what we've done recently, which expands that, is we're able to use the modern technology and stream these live classes out to different classes that they sign on to. And we've had really good luck where we brought in several states at one time, classes from different states, and they can interact. In the case where I make the presentation, they can interact with me and ask questions. And we've gotten great feedback. And we were in California, Kentucky, Arkansas, Wyoming. I mean, it's just a number of states that you can't do when you just sit right here and wait for them to come in. And just like you're doing, we're out there reaching people that might be ignorant to what it takes to keep this country strong. And one message that I wanted to make real clear, and we do it every class, is that you don't have to be in the military necessarily to serve your country, and you don't have to have a Medal of Honor. We just use that as an example to bring home to those young kids the importance of doing the right thing at the right time.
Well, the Medal of Honor is certainly a recognition of your decisions in life. And, you know, I'm an Air Force grad, so we would have Medal of Honor recipients come frequently, and probably you were there, I would imagine, if you were in Colorado. But the recognition among the cadets was instant. But do you feel out in society people understand what the medal represents?
Well, I hate to say this, but as time goes on, it's less and less important to people. Let's face it, this country, no matter how difficult things seem to a lot of people, people are comfortable.
Yeah,
they're
true.
living a good life. They might make a problem because they don't know how to deal with things, or they feel like they have to have problems. But the further we go along here, we're losing sight of what's important. And you can tell when a young person comes in here and they ask the questions they ask, what their parents were like. You can tell.
I'm sure.
It is ultimately the responsibility of the parents to raise their kids. I mean, the government shouldn't. We should. We don't raise them. We just provide them information, and we tell them how to think, necessarily not what to think.
Fantastic. So let's move to Vietnam. You were a young 18-year-old kid. You enlisted, and you tried to go in the Special Forces, I read, but you went in, I think, 82nd Airborne for a few years, and then went into the Green Berets, and then you were put in a place, and a lot happened instantly almost. So tell us about that, as your decisions as a young man, please.
Well, to put it in the right perspective, just a couple blocks from this place here was the Vail Hotel where the Army recruiting office was. I was 17 and wanted to join the Army, and wanted to join Special Forces. I just heard about it. It's kind of a new outfit, you know. 1961, they were given the beret. This was 62.
John Wayne, you had the song and everything, you know.
Well, I didn't know about John Wayne. He came later. I think he was 65 or 6. I don't know. But so the recruiter, he didn't give me all the facts. You know, he said, sure, you can volunteer for Special Forces, but he didn't tell me I'd be 21. So I went to airborne school and went to the 82nd and cooled my heels there for, about 3.5 years, 4 years before I was able to go to Special Forces training. I did make a little excursion down the Dominican Republic as a squad leader in the 82nd, and saw a little action down there as a young guy. And actually, when we were there in 65 is when we heard that the first units were going to Vietnam. I didn't know what Vietnam was at that time. You know how it is when you're young soldier. But the first cav went over there, and of course they got into the Ia Drang Valley, and then we all knew about what Vietnam was all about, or we thought. And wanted to get over there, worried that the war was going to be over before could see it.
So you graduated Special Forces training, you got put into Vietnam, and then the Tet Offensive happened. You know, and at the academy we learned that the Tet was not successful really militarily, but it was psychologically, and really the impact on the American people. I'm fascinated. Tell us about that experience. What were you doing when it kicked off?
Well, just to back up just a little bit. So I went over to be in the Special Forces, being an A team. That's where the action is, you know. Heard the song about, 12 men and all that. That's what I wanted to do. Got over there, and the folks from the 5th Special Forces came to Cameron Bay and took all those that were replacement for Special Forces up north, and they didn't call my name, and I was kind of wondering what's going on here. 2 days went by, and I'm not sure what the deal is. I'm getting a little concerned, and then my name was called over the loudspeaker, And they said, we're going to take you to the airport to get on C-130 and go to Saigon. I said, I don't want to go to Saigon. You know, it wasn't where the action was, I thought. And,
Right.
But to wrap it up is that's where I was recruited into a special program run by the Central Intelligence Agency. And I was to be a lone American to organize, train, equip, and lead. That's what special forces do in an A team.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm going to do it as one guy.
Wow.
And organize, train, equip, and lead indigenous troops in combat with the mission to eliminate infrastructure through capture.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got 2 or 3 days of briefings in Saigon, put me on a Pilatus Porter and flew down to the Delta near the Cambodian border and landed on a little piece of a road down there and met by a guy that said, welcome here. We've been waiting for you, and here's some of your troops, and you got to recruit some more. That's about all they told me.
Wow. Did they speak English? I'm curious. I mean, did the Vietnamese troops, were they English speaking at the time?
No, I was, you know, Special Forces is works all over the world, and you have areas that you specialize in.
Right.
And I just finished Spanish language school.
I see.
So in the Army's wisdom, I went to Southeast Asia, and all of my troops were Vietnamese, Cambodians, and Chinese.
Wow.
And I did have an interpreter that spoke Vietnamese. It didn't last long because he was good hanging around the base camp, but he didn't like that combat stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he was worthless. Probably because he just didn't know any better. But so I ended up picking out a couple guys, mainly the Chinese, that could speak a little English. And because I had some Spanish, some spoke French. So there's some words are similar, or the construction of sentences are. And so I got by.
Wow.
And started to organize my element and get down to the business of capturing people. And it was not that easy to do. And so after I left Saigon, I made a short stop into Canton, where the regional headquarters was. And I met this fascinating man, Jim Ward, who was one of the original CIA guys with the OSS that jumped into Burma and organized the Kachins to fight the Japanese. And he was the guy kind of over me immediately. And I asked him, being a young guy, I says, you know, I want to do a good job, but how am I going to know if I'm doing what I'm supposed to? He looked at me and he says, Drew, your job is to capture people. If you're not capturing them, you're going to know it. So,
wow.
Yes, sir. I took off, and that was the deal.
And so where were you when the Tet Offensive kicked off? Did you move from there, or did you stay there for a while?
Well, I didn't stay there. I just left in a few hours, actually.
I see.
Go up to my province with Chow Duck. And there were no conventional military there. There was a Special Forces A team in the mountains, and then there was a B team in town of Chow Duck. So I had to organize these guys. I had about 137 that I was able to put together. Quite a few of them were already there. And figured out how I was going to structure them. And right away, I said, I need to get information. How am I going to get information? You just don't go out and capture people. You need to capture bad guys.
Did you have a target list, or somebody, or people that they were looking for you to pick up, or what?
We made it. We made our own list. I mean, there was no communications from up, down to up, except once a month on a normal call. And then once a week, they made a call on a single sideband radio to see if you needed ammunition or whatever. And so it's pretty amazing. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that you can get mission type orders to go do the work. kind of neat. It kind of ruined me from that time on in my life, because here I am 24 and I just was in charge.
Yeah.
So, and I was actually considered a civilian. No one there knew my rank. They knew I was probably a civilian working, probably CIA. I mean, that's how that people think there. And there was two reasons why I was undercover that way. Was one, the Vietnamese wouldn't be listening to a staff sergeant, especially a province chief or an officer, because they're very rank conscious. And in the U.S. military, if I ran into any of them, I'd have a chain of command issue, you know, being a staff sergeant. So, so that's how we got started. And so when I broke this 137 guys, it was about what I had, into 18-man teams. We had 5 districts, and we put them out there and then left some at the headquarters to mainly get information. And we started getting information. Believe it or not, we were picking up a few people pretty fast. I mean, because we were right on the Cambodian border. 4 districts were touching Cambodia right there. And the district capitals were within a few miles of Cambodia. In fact, Chao Duc City was 1,500 meters from Cambodia.
Wow.
So we're proximity was right there. And so, all right, we started bringing in a few people, but we also started to figure out what was happening, getting the layout of the land. And we spent a little time in the Cambodian side of the situation. And so we heard that there was this Chinese New Year ceasefire coming up. They've had them before. Both sides were looking for opportunities to have a ceasefire for whatever reason, probably to build up their situation anyway. So I got word there's going to be this ceasefire, and I figured out that meant I couldn't conduct offensive operations. That's all right. But I came back across the border and to the headquarters there, and there was one other American that I worked for. He was the CIA guy that I reported to. And he said, well, we're going to have a ceasefire, but there should be a lot of people moving in, you know, to celebrate from around the country, the province and the country. And I said, well, something's not right. I've been out there and I don't see any of the normal traffic, people walking down the trails or in the sampans in the river and going place, nothing. And so I said, I'm going to go out again. I got cleaned up, a couple hours, took off. Happened to be a SEAL platoon in the area just looking for action. And they said, hey, we'll go with you. I said, that's fine. It's kind of nice to have another American and to be along. And so they went, the platoon went. And we got up near the Cambodian border. And at that time, we just got into a little bit of contact, not much, nothing to even mention other than the fact that we did engage. And okay, let's see what we're going to make out of this. Since I got these Americans, I got to have some support to, because when it was just me and 4 or 5 guys, we just blended into the woodwork.
Right.
The forest. And that's how we survived. But when you got a larger element, you need to be able to have the artillery or whatever to support. So we called the district headquarters, Anfu, where there was an advisor unit there. There was an artillery unit, and we're going to get support for this contact that we just made. Found out then that there was no artillery available. It has all been directed to Chao Fu, the city. And you could see in the distance, we were, I don't know, 15, 20 miles away, but you could see the lights. And we weren't sure what the deal was. One of the SEALs this was dark now, we're in the nighttime, I was joking, so maybe that's fireworks for Tet. And then I said, well, if it is, it got out of hand, because that's big.
Mm-hmm.
It turned out that the enemy had totally infiltrated that provincial capital, as they did in about 41 others across the country. And that's why we didn't see anybody out there. We went through them, but they had come in under the cover of the holiday, and so they were in Chowduck when they initiated this attack. And so we're going to head back and give them a hand. And I was concerned about some of the civilians, volunteer civilians, USAID people that were there.
This is a special report.
Knowing how to invest your money is harder than ever before. Dealing with stock market volatility, record debt, and terrorist attacks requires new thinking. At U.S. Asset Management, we can help you see the world more clearly so that you can move beyond the chaos and invest with confidence. Call us, visit us online, or drop by our office. U.S. Asset Management, helping you make better decisions with your money.
Mm-hmm.
So I was talking to Jim Moore, and on the radio as we were heading back on the Navy boats, and he said, "Well, I'm worried that the enemies overrun the town, and was worried about the one nurse that he knew, and she's probably killed, because that's where their center of their attack was." So we headed down the river, trying to figure out what we were going to do. And I told the PBR, let's head right for the Vietnamese Tactical Operations Center, which is very close to the river in the center of town. And they had 3 PBRs, riverboats. I don't know, 4 of them. And we were in the middle. And so what we did is we all 4 raced towards the beach. 2 peeled off, and we went straight into the beach, unloaded, and they took off down the river. And as we were approaching the town from the river, there was mortar rounds hitting the water. It was kind of like it might have been a D-Day or something. We were making a landing, and a lot of machine gun fire, rocket fire, and but we didn't get hit and made it right in there. One of the reasons is we went right into the center of them, and so it probably caught them off guard. If we would have hit their maneuver elements on the edge, we might have had a different situation, but we went right into the middle because that's where the river took us. And got out, the boats took off and went up to the Tactical Operations Center. A little dicey there, because you can imagine there's about 150 defenders is all they had in that headquarters. And here we are trying to get to them, they're under fire. And finally, I'm yelling all kinds of slang and whatever that they could maybe identify. And I had some Chinese guys with me and a couple Cambos. And so they started yelling too. And then the gates opened and we ran inside. And wasn't prepared to see what we saw. And that was the acting province chief, just totally demoralized. I had met him before. He spoke very good English, admired him a lot, but he had that 2,000 meter stare. He was just looking out there, and he said, "They killed my wife and children and my best friend is bodyguard." He knew they had killed the bodyguard. He didn't know that they killed his wife and children, but he thought they had. And he was worthless. I couldn't get anything out of him. So I got down to the embassy house and went down there to secure a vehicle. Got 2 Jeeps, with one with a 50 caliber on it and one with a A6 machine gun. And we're going to go out and figure out what happened to the civilians. And the first one on the list was the nurse. not only because we knew her, she was a nurse, she was young, and she was close. And we took off this three of the SEALs, Jim Moore, and myself, and raced down to where Maggie's house was. And it didn't look good. Her international scout must have had 1,000 bullet holes in it. The wall was all covered with bullet holes. And Jim and I got up to the gate and had one of those iron gates.
Yep.
Like the French shoes. It's a pretty nice, beautiful little town, French buildings and stuff, you know. And I looked through there and this is not good. It was a rubble. Hole blown out of the back of the room where the VC, we found out later, were traveling between house to house, going through the buildings instead of the streets. It's kind of a clever idea. Anyway, we're yelling and nothing. And all of a sudden I heard this little noise, whimper. I'm here. This is Maggie. I said, come on out. She said, well, the VC is still in there. And I said, I think they're gone. So she opened the door. I could see her. It wasn't but about 20 feet away, less. And I couldn't get through that iron gate. It was locked. And it wasn't shooting the lock off like you see in the movie. There was nothing. It wasn't going to happen. It was just, and as soon as she opened the door, 2 VC were right around the corner, about 5 feet from where I was, dashed back towards the back of the room. And she came out and I said, Maggie, we got to have the key to get in because we couldn't go around back. There's a lot of VC back there. It wasn't far away, like 15 yards, maybe 20 yards. And she reached down in that pile of, they'd ransacked the place and threw all in the middle of the room and came up with a key at the first. I don't know how she did it. She come up there and her hands were shaking, and I reached in there and had steadied her hand, and VC, they were getting some fire across the street, and steadied her hand, and I got the key and we opened it and got her out of there, took her back to the Vietnamese headquarters. And that's when it started. And we started going after the other civilians. And I took 2 of the SEALs and a few of my guys I operated with, the Chinese, and we went to the USAID compound. There were 8 civilians there. And there were 2, they had 2 prefab houses. One was totally burned. The other one had some damage, but nobody in there, but ran through the gate, left the other guys at the Jeep, and there was a bunker in the back and a wall. And I'm yelling for them to come out, and finally I recognized his face of one guy, and he said, there's VC out here. We can't come. I said, they're gone, but they're coming back. I heard that coming back thing. He yelled back in there and he said, it's Drew. He wants us to go. So they all piled in the Jeep, and it looked kind of comical, heavily loaded like that. With the 50 caliber on there, and then about 7 or 8 guys, and it was just wobbling down the road, and we got them out. And so anyway, we were feeling pretty good, and so we decided I had about 4 or 5 of the indigenous troops that I had, and then the 13 of the 14 SEALs. The commander stayed with the radio and for the SEALs in the headquarters of the Vietnamese headquarters. And we're going to start to see what we can do, take this town back. And wasn't a lot of guys, but we were doing pretty good and making some progress. And one of the SEALs was hit in the head by a sniper. Well, I don't know if it's a sniper or not. Everybody's a sniper when you're in the town, right? But no, it was by shooting a rifle and hit him. I saw the AK-47 he had, and he shot him right over the eye, and we knew he wasn't going to make it. So the SEALs took him back He hadn't died yet, and put him on a river boat. We're going to head to evacuate him because they couldn't bring in any aircraft. There was no air support. Provincial capital, the 41 out of the 43, I guess it was under attack. We didn't know that. We just thought it was us. And it was everybody. It was around the country. And so when they got him back, they didn't come back to the town. They were ordered to stay and go back to Canto, which was the regional headquarters. And two of the SEALs were really distressed over that decision, Rex Johnson and Dennis Strady. And they were very, very distressed that they were leaving me there with those guys, just with half a dozen Vietnamese, Cambodians, and Chinese. And so they left. And next 24 hours, it was going house to house and clearing the streets. And people say, well, how did that happen? With just a few of you. Well, a lot of my guys, the troops, were celebrating Tet, so they were in the town. And they could see there was nobody on the street except the bad guys and our little group of maybe close to 20 about that time. And so they could see us and they joined in. Yeah, we ended up with a good solid 20 or more guys. And every time we cleared a building that was being defended by police or somebody, we helped them and treated their wounds, and the ones that survived, and left them there to guard our rear, because I was concerned that we're moving so fast that they're going to come in behind. And worked out, and we moved awful fast. And one of the things that gave us the edge, not only did we have more to shoot at by a lot, we knew what we were doing, and they weren't sure. All I had was what I had, and we could maneuver. They were trying to fire maneuver, and lack of communications, it didn't work for them. So after about another 24 hours after that first night, after the SEALs left, we were able to clear them out. And the last stronghold, they had planned to hoist their flag. In fact, they had up the province chief's house flagpole. It was up there flying BC flag. And so that was the last stronghold after we cleared the hotel out in the theater. Probably ought to back up. The theater is probably an interesting thing because we were running down. This is a built up area now. It's built concrete buildings. As I said, it was kind of nice, pretty little town. Then there was slums off to the side, the shacks, stuff like every city over there was like. And we were running down there, and we got some fire out of the theater, which was a pretty significant structure. And as I was running down this little alley, I could see this guy in a hole, this crouched down older guy. Didn't look like he belonged there. So I just grabbed him and brought him with me. And my guys were saying, "Oh, leave him. He's nothing, just an old man, right?" But I had him. I said something wasn't right.
Yeah.
Had a fresh haircut, very fresh, brown pajamas instead of the black pajamas. It was different. And so we ran past the entrance of the theater and opened up the side door, and there's a little sign above it that probably said exit in Vietnamese. One of those lights there. Opened that, and all hell broke loose. I mean, there was a lot of VC in there. No power in the city, so it was darker than hell. And so I slammed the door shut and said, "Well, what are we going to do? There must be as many of them in there as there are us out here." And I think I had about 20 then, guys. And so we opened the door. I opened the door again, and they were firing. and I had this guy with me, and I just thought about it, held him up to the light, and the light shone across his face, and they stopped firing.
Wow.
Oh, we got somebody here.
Yeah.
And we just ducked in when they stopped firing. Of course, they started shooting again, but and all you could see was the flash of red and green tracers back and forth and ricocheting off the walls. I thought, oh God, this is not going to be good. But then my guy started yelling and I was yelling. It was a little chaotic, and they started throwing rifles down. You could hear them hitting the deck. And we opened that door again, and 19 of them came out of there, prison, surrendered. We only had that many of our own. And so we got them back to the embassy house where Jim was, and a couple other, the Chinese were securing our embassy house. It was our headquarters, and put him down there on the concrete, back against this cement wall, briefing Jim on what had transpired. And I said, I think this guy knows something. And well, let's call the camp. We had the little camp was outside of town, about 2 miles away. See if they can get into the headquarters here. And they came in. And there was a guy that we had captured before named Bahun, who was equivalent to a general officer. We captured him before. We didn't send him up the ladder. We kept him. And he walked in and saw this guy sitting there, and he said, "Number 1 VC, Sal Bay."
Wow.
So Sal Bay had a document, and I won't tell him how he concealed it right now, but it was all rolled up nice and rolled. They got it, and it was a declaration of the liberation of Chow Duck, and he's the president of, in translation, president of Chow Duck City.
Wow.
And at that time, we were starting to figure out that this was countrywide. So we got word to headquarters, Saigon. I guess we called Canto first, and said, we got somebody here. He's a general officer. Do you want to talk to him? I said, absolutely. They sent a Pilatus Porter up. I don't know if you know what they are. They're pretty neat little airplanes that land anywhere. Landed on the road, and we took, Jim and I took Sal Bay down to Canto, dropped him off. And because didn't want to take any chances of someone else taking him. We're talking about a general officer. And so we took him down there and turned around and came back. But that turned the tide of the battle right then. And so the 600 or so VC, that's what they estimated, 2 battalions. Their battalions were much smaller than ours, 300 or so. And our 20 guys pretty much discouraged them from taking over, and we got Sal Bay. And after we got Sal Bay, I came back, went back into the city. This is about close to 48 hours now. And we're going to go to the province chief's house. There's that flag sitting there waving in the breeze, you know. So we had 20 some of our guys now. We felt pretty good. We had a pretty good number. We're organized. We're feeling good. Went down the side street, heading towards the province chief's house, which turned out to be their headquarters during the battle. And as I ran up towards the front door, a guy came out of that house, stood by that flagpole like, you're not taking this flag. Well, I took him out, and I tore the flag down, stuck it in my shirt, and went on in there. And there were a few VC left. And as I ran through the door, I could see the body of the Major Fung's bodyguard. So he was right; he was executed. Clearly, you could see that. and I ran into the front door yelling at these guys, and there was VC running up the stairs to the second floor. They were throwing hand grenades out, and we were kind of kicking them off to the side. And we got to the top, and I heard, and I'm covering my two guys in there because they could speak the language. I sent two guys in there to talk them out of, the surrender or whatever, but we didn't give them a lot of chance. We just thought we wanted them to give up. But the last two ran up those stairs, and just as they ran in, I fired at them, and they hit both of them, and they ran out. They dove out the window, second floor window, and I thought maybe they'd be laying down there, but somehow they got up and left. And while this was happening, two of my my troops were yelling in this closet, and there was somebody in there, and they were gonna just hose them down or throw a hand grenade in there or something. I said, wait, I don't know. This is Major Fung's house. His wife and children were in there, and they were still alive. So we got them out and put them on the vehicles, and we had a little 1-ton truck, and it was pretty well shot up, but we loaded all of them on there, a bunch of my guys, and they waddled on back down to the embassy house. And that's pretty much when it started to fall apart for the enemy. And when I drove into that compound with that following that truck.
Our world is changing rapidly. Many crucial systems we depend upon are collapsing. And the most important system that is failing is the food supply.
Mr. President, this Council is more than aware of the multiple challenges and threats the world is facing today. But the threat of famine, people starving slowly to death, must be a red line.
These food prices are going to keep going up and up, and they're going to keep feeding excuse after excuse, narrative after narrative.
Yeah.
Where you're going to have to get off that treadmill and start getting more autonomous with your own food growing.
You want to make sure that you can eat, because frankly, food is the biggest issue as we are going through these transitions.
But amidst the chaos, there is a path to resilience. Marjorie Wildcraft is the female leader of the survival and preparedness movement. Marjorie has taught millions of people how to grow an abundance of food in a grid-down situation, even if you have no experience, are older, or out of shape.
I've spent decades finding the fastest, easiest, and funnest ways for the average person to be able to grow a lot of food. I've created a step-by-step process that's so simple that even kids to elders have been using it in order to grow a lot of their own food. And you can too, even if you have no experience, you're older, or you're out of shape.
Growing your own food is like printing your own money. Get started today.
And Major Fung had moved in 2 days, and he saw his wife and children. He just snapped to and hugged them a little bit. And then he started barking orders and told them to leave, and he's back into the game. And when that happened, he started deploying his troops, and they finished things up for us. But I understand that is, I don't know if his wife's still alive. I think Major Fung came to the United States, and I heard he just passed a couple of years ago. But I hear the 2 children are living in the Maryland area. So it feels good to know that you gave them a life.
Of course it does. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I mean, that's a lot went on in those 56 hours, but we don't have 56 hours to tell it.
Right.
So I did put it in a book. I was asked to write that book that the center carries, and if anybody's interested, I can get you a copy. And
yeah, I would love it. What's the name of the book?
Rescue of River City.
Mm-hmm.
It is about the 56 hours, but the remarkable thing about it is I was asked to write it by the outfit that I worked for in 1999, and I wasn't sure who was generating that phone call, because I couldn't write about some of this stuff. But Jim Ward, the same man that told me you're not capturing people, you're going to know it.
Mm-hmm.
Called me to say, write the book. He's in the forward in the book, so I knew that it was legit. They said, you can't have an editor, you can't have a publisher, you can't have a ghostwriter, whatever. You have to do it yourself, so we know what you're putting in there. And I said, well, where do I go with this stuff? I can't put it down. It says, write everything that you want. So I spilled my guts on this thing, and they didn't change a thing.
Holy cow.
So it talks about how we were structured and the relationship, even Jim's alias, all that stuff is in there. And so it's done real well as far as an educational book, but they can get it to the center if anybody's interested. And the proceeds of the book goes to the center.
Fantastic. Well, we'll have to promote that a little bit and maybe do an article on it. Yeah. Oh, thank you. We'll get it out there and try to sell some copies. Definitely. I have a question for you. So you had these foreign troops. How did you know all of them were trustworthy when you just had a big infiltration across all of South Vietnam?
You mean the guys that were working for me?
Yeah.
That's a real good question because I didn't.
Mm.
So I had Vietnamese, Cambodians, and Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't like each other. They really didn't. I mean, you know, racism and all that is not new only in the United States. It's everywhere. People don't like other ethnic groups. And so while we were on the same unit, I kind of worked that situation. I said to the Vietnamese, you got to watch those Cambodians now. And the Cambodians, you got to watch those Vietnamese. And the 16 Chinese that we had, I didn't worry about them at all. And I paid them accordingly. And so there was a bounty on my head, as there was anybody doing that work. Wasn't all that high, but it was a lot of money for those folks there. But it was they only tried to collect it one time. And my strategy of turning it on each other worked, because the Vietnamese uncovered a ploy by this Cambodian to take me out on one of the operations when we were going. And the other thing I did, Todd, was I planned these ops 2 or 3 at a time. They didn't know which one I was going on until the last minute.
Well, you have this experience dealing with infiltration. How would you apply that to a young soldier today who's in the U.S. military that may have some people involved in it that don't have our best interest at heart?
You know, I've thought about that a lot lately. You know, I've stayed active with the special ops community until just a couple of years ago. I mean, like just 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I passed that on to them. There is a little difference now that I'm concerned about, and that's why I've joined STARS that you're familiar with.
Yes.
That I think we're probably part of getting it going.
Yeah.
And I'm very concerned about it because a lot of what we did it because we knew we were doing it for something we believed in, the Republic. Everybody in it together. And in another combat tour, when I had in the 101st with the company commander after I got a battlefield commission, we had 100% draftees. I'm talking about 100%, including the shake and bake sergeants. They didn't want to be there, but they still serve in a country that had the overall we had the overall interests of that country, whether you believe everything in it or not. But you were all belong to this group, this country, this being, this republic. But when we get so far, I'm kind of theorizing a little bit, or maybe philosophizing somewhat. But when we start focusing on so many special interests, are we going to lose sight of the real purpose of why we are doing what we do? whether you support a war or not, it's not a soldier's idea to support it or not. You can join or you can get out if you don't in this day and age. But I want to feel that everybody is out there to look out for each other, not just if you happen to be some cultural preference or some special interest. It can't work. We have to all believe in the same thing above our special interests, because it's concerning to me because, and I've talked to the young, not so much the special operators because they're in it for a lot of reasons. And maybe they just like to work, you know, the mission. But we're getting away from that too, because it's getting into that where they're in it for another reason than serve their country. They're in it for maybe they want some kind of a reassignment of their agenda or whatever. It's, you know, I don't know. That's a different kind of person that's going to be on the battlefield.
Sure it is.
Are they
But I
going to
think
be?
that could be by design as a really ingenious way to destroy the American military, in my opinion.
Well, I don't know. Maybe. I'm one that absolutely don't dwell on conspiracies. Sometimes it's entertaining to talk about, but I deal strictly on vulnerabilities, me personally, and capabilities.
Right.
And there is no force more where that's more significant than our military.
Completely.
Because we have capabilities and we have vulnerabilities. Our potential enemy has capabilities and vulnerabilities. We exploit the vulnerabilities, avoid the capabilities as much as we can, because we got to fight to win. If we go to war, hope we never have to again, but we're probably going to.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to, and I appreciate your time. Thank you. You mentioned before we started that you wanted to talk about what happened after you got recognition, after you got the medal. How did that impact your life?
Well, it did. Receiving the Medal of Honor really changed me, and it would change anybody especially if you stay in the military. Because there's expectations of how you're supposed to be. You know, it's not what you demand. There's expectations. So I stayed in the military, and after I got a battlefield commission, took over a rifle company. I didn't realize that's going to be the greatest leadership challenge I ever had, was taking over 100 or so draftees in the field, and they found out that their new company commander is a Medal of Honor recipient, and all they want to do is get home. And you know, I started hearing little things like, was he going to get another Medal of Honor? He's really pushing us hard and all that. Well, I push hard because I believe in a good offense, and it turned out it worked. And they finally were the finest troops I've ever served with, those draftees. Once they realized they could get the enemy running, and we didn't camp out at night, we were digging in an ambush, no more night defensive position. They thought I was nuts. No, you don't need a defensive position if you're going to ambush them. And it worked. But so that's drifting a little away from what you asked. But if you dwell on a good point or a bad point in your life, and you got 50 years behind you, and you live off the reputation of that one act, your life is, what good is it? What have you gained? And sure, the Medal of Honor opened some doors. I don't doubt that. I mean, I've had some pretty good assignments, asked to do some pretty good things, especially after 9/11, you know, because of the Medal of Honor. And some of the contract work I did for some other folks during the Cold War, I think was more beneficial to us as a country, more rewarding to me to know that we were tracking those Soviet submarines under the ice. I mean, we were doing some neat stuff for 10 years. That's what I mean by not just sitting on your haunches and living off of a reputation. It's building on what you know. It's the same token. If you do something bad, you're going to learn on it and just dwell on it either. Just try to improve. And the other thing I'll leave with this is the center is successful. I'm pretty sure because one, we had the mission and we had the need, but I was able to get into some doors to get support initially. I know that it helped.
Sure.
So that's where it benefited me. And where I feel better about what we're doing here right now with the center than I have or anything I've done in the past, because this is so important for our young people and their parents. Need a little help too.
Sure.
In recognizing that they have a responsibility to teach their kids about the history and what's right or wrong. We can't leave it up to some government element to decide to tell our 5- and 6-year-old kids, and maybe even younger, how they're supposed to think. And so this is not political. I've been at one time, when we opened the doors here 14 years ago, and I gave this little talk at the Memorial Bridge right over here and invited everybody to the grand opening of the center, and a woman, not maliciously, but was walking beside me, said, well, I guess we have another right-wing organization. And I said, well, I never thought of that. What do you mean? She said, well, that only conservative has honor, integrity, and patriotism. It's not about politics. You know,
Yeah.
It's not about politics. It's about values. And you can have all the political ambitions you want, but if your values are rotten, the goals are going to be rotten.
Well, I think the whole Republican Democrat paradigm is falling apart as it is. I think it's, do you want to be controlled or not? Essentially, is where we are as a country. Last question, STARS. Tell us about your involvement with STARS, please, Major.
Yeah, STARS is, I've been thinking about what really bothers me personally. And that's when I started talking to active duty members of the military and started feeling concern about where they're going. Some are getting out and all that. And I started thinking about, boy, our readiness is suffering, especially with all this DEI stuff. And a lot of the senior officers wouldn't be senior officers if they didn't embrace DEI. They wouldn't be.
Sure.
It's not only a waste of money, it's dangerous to put people in special categories. So I was talking to General Arbuckle, Joe Arbuckle, in Westcliff, Colorado, where I live, and he mentioned something about STARS, and I know, oh yeah, it's another organization. Just, I wasn't sure, but then I started communicating with him a little bit, and I said, well, that's the real deal. They're only about the readiness of the military, and that we've lost our way a little bit. We've lost our way a lot.
Yeah.
And it's got to be fixed. It's got to be fixed, whoever wins this election.
Agreed. Yes. Major, thank you so much. I think this will be one of our most watched episodes. I really appreciate your time and talking to us about the center, and we'll do some more on that and get the word out and help push your book out and get some sales. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Todd.
Take care. We're fortunate to have with us today on War Stories retired Naval Captain G. Dog Pearson. He's got quite a history, over 150 combat missions into Vietnam in the F-8 Crusader. Am I correct, sir?
That's correct, Todd.
And you've had quite the career. You were referred to us through Major General Hollingsworth, who we interviewed before. And thanks for coming on. And what did I miss in your bio?
Well, not much. It seems like a long ago story. In my case, probably 57 years ago, I became, well, more than that, about 59 or 50, 60 years ago, I started through flight training and went all through that, and my first choice was to go to the F-8 Crusader, which had an interesting, not necessarily a biography, but it was an interesting airplane in the fact that it was extremely loved by those people who flew it. And the other fighter, of course, in the Navy was the F-4 at the time, but the F-8, single seat, 4 20-millimeter guns on it. So it was kind of reminiscent of what a fighter pilot should be flying.
Right.
Anyway, it took about, it's normal to have about a 2-year workup to finally get your wings, and then go through about 4 or 5, 6 months of training. And all the West Coast fighters were all at Miramar in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I wanted to go. Sort of, at the time, what I was be about 24 or 5 years old, and just chomping at the bit to get going, if you will. Anyway, right away, almost get through the RAG, which is what the Navy training part is for the airplane you're going to fly.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a great experience. That took about 4, 5, 6 months. And then coincidentally, the squadron I was assigned to was just getting ready to deploy. And that was on the Bonhoeffer Shard.
Mm-hmm.
And that carrier class is called a 27 Charlie class carrier. They're the small deck carriers.
Right.
Originally, they tried to put F-4s and F-8s on the small boats, but it didn't work. The F-4s were too heavy and not enough room, and there were other considerations. So they wind up, all the F-8s were on the Charlie class carriers, 27 Charlie class carriers. Anyway, workups. Unfortunately, our boat had just come out of the yard, meaning the Bonhoeffer Shard, and it had been in there to get all kinds of updated equipment. And as happens to every military unit, the closer you get to your deployment date, the more critical things become. And in our case, everybody had to get carrier qualified again on the boat. And so the air wing moves aboard the boat. And in our case,
is that the vessel that burned down a few years ago in the yard? Am I thinking?
Well, I think it was named the Bonhoeffer Shard, but it was another boat.
Okay,
it wasn't the old carriers.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure about that, Todd. But regardless, went out for workups over a couple of weeks. Everybody's behind. None of the equipment worked on the carrier. They just didn't have time. They wanted to get it out and get the air wing qualified, because our deployment date, which was in January, would be 67,
Mm-hmm.
was clicking down. Anyway, real major problems occurred during that care qual period prior to the deployment. Ultimately, it worked out. And for those of you who may not be familiar with the F-8, it's a terrific fighter.
It doesn't have a lot of the F-4, the F-86, the F-105. They all got a lot of attention, but maybe I'm just because I'm an Air Force guy, but you don't hear a lot about the F-8.
No, you don't. sometimes what you do hear about is the fact that it had an overall, it's the life of the F-8 Crusader with the United States Navy the accident rate was 87% of all the airplanes that ever flew. It was terrific off the catapult, but the problem was coming back aboard the boat, which I'm going to have a few stories here that might sound not gruesome, but that's the way it happened. The F-8 coming aboard the boat was speed unstable, and of course you have to be exceptionally lined up and on glide slope and all the other things that go with landing almost any airplane. But coming aboard the carrier it was the statistic that came out, and this actually applies to all airplanes even today. In the last 20 seconds prior to landing, you can make as many as 100 corrections in that last 20 seconds. So obviously they're all the feedback you're getting from the boat itself and the lens, the beat ball, they call it. It all goes into keeping you to land where you should. And again, I'm just going to recite a couple of problems that exist, and this is F-8 specific. One of the things is that the landing area on these small carriers is very near the aft end of the boat. In other words, the angled deck. And of course, as the airplane comes aboard, there's a hook hanging down, and that's what you hope to catch the wire with, which will stop you. Anyway, the essence of that is on a steady deck, the hook to ramp clearance for the target wire. There are 4 wires across, cross deck pennants, but wires, we call it. The target wire is the number 3 wire. So if you were coming across the aft end of the boat, aiming and going to hopefully get the 3 wire, the hook to ramp clearance, in other words, there's the aft end of the boat, the hook to ramp clearance in a steady deck is 10 feet. If you were to get the 1 wire, obviously you're low or going low through the glide slope. That hook to ramp clearance reduces to about 5 feet, even if you get the 1 wire. Aircraft carriers, including the big ones today, move up and down and roll and pitch and yaw, basically, is what they're doing. Unfortunately, different swell conditions affect the boat. We had decks in some periods of time. This is actually over in the Gulf of Tonkin. The deck was pitching 20 feet from bottom to top. So it is impossible to land under those conditions. So the LSO is being able to talk to you and wave you off. If the deck cycle, it has to be, you almost have to catch it in the middle to be able to land. Anyway, moral of the story is we had an exceptional number of ramp strikes, and those are dramatic in almost any case. And I'm going to tell 2 quick stories before we move away from this subject. One of our airplanes hit the ramp. This is in one of those periods, line periods. Hit the ramp, goes obviously up the angle, and this happened 2 or 3 times. When it went off the angle, all mangled up, maybe on fire, it tended to roll to the right. And if the pilot was still conscious, tried the ejection, which takes about a second or 2 to get through the sequence. ejected right into the side of the ship
Mhm.
and was killed, obviously.
Yeah.
Another ramp strike with one of our pilots in my squadron. He was having problems. Most of these are at night, incidentally, too,
Yeah.
which really complicates the problem. Anyway, he come down having had a couple of bolters and was everybody's low on gas all the time. Anyway, I think he went up and plugged once, came down, trying it again, and went for it. And the airplane hit a little nose first, but cracked the whole thing in two. The front end went off of the angle, and I happened to have the duty in the ready room that night and ran up on the flight deck, and there was this F8, only the aft end trapped in the wire, but there was no front end.
So he went off
Anyway,
the side or what?
yeah,
Yeah.
it was a hard landing.
Yeah.
One of the fortunate stories, this happened to a fellow named Pat Scott in my sister's squadron. He came down, and this is the same era. We had about two line periods that we were, the wave conditions or the swell conditions were really bothersome. Anyway, at night again, came down, hit the ramp, knew he hit the ramp, goes sliding up the deck, and he's thinking to himself, I've got to eject before I go off the end. Maybe it's going to roll to the right again. And he did. So sure enough, the airplane rolled to the right, but he by a millisecond or two, he ejected correctly, but no one saw the ejection. Anyway, he went sailing up across the forward end of the boat. There was two airplanes parked up there, and there's little like bowsprints, they're bridle arresters. His parachute caught one of those bridle arresters, and he's swinging down in front of the ship, unseen by almost, well, everyone.
Wow.
Came up on the deck, myself and a bunch of other people. Lots of debris around. Everybody is really irritated and both saddened, like, man, there's another guy didn't make it. Anyway, two plane captains were up in the front of the boat. They saw this parachute hanging on this bridle arrestor, pulled him up, and there's Pat Scott at the end. He wasn't even wet.
Jeez.
Anyway, we're walking around, and I went back towards the LSO platform and started walking forward. And what the plane captains did, hauled him up, unhooked him, put him on one of those wire stretchers.
Right.
We're driving aft to take him on one of the elevators down, and I happened to be near the LSO platform, and I looked up, and sure enough, I saw this guy, and Pat Scott, very colorful guy. He's kind of waving his finger at everybody and smiling, and he wasn't even wet. And I ran back to the LSO people. We're all looking in the water still for debris or maybe a life vest or something. And I said, hey, everybody, Pat Scott's alive. He's right over there. And it was like a real bad joke. They were saying, hey, Pearson,
cut it out.
And he was. So
wow.
That's a good part of it. Anyway, overall, our air wing, this is a 67 cruise, which was about 8 months long, from January through August. We were right at the height of everything going on in North Vietnam. And incidentally, the Navy, for about probably 95% of all missions were into North Vietnam, almost like two different wars. We would read in Stars and Stripes what was going on down south, but up north where we were, in some ways simpler, because everybody across the beach was hypothetically a bad guy.
Yeah.
We know they were shooting at us all the time. Anyway, between people who were killed in action, POWs, shot down and recovered, which was another the major stories that came out of that, and around the ship having accidents and so forth. Our air wing, not loss, meaning killed rate, but overall we were, I think, at 25 or 26% of losses. Somebody had been shot down and recovered or killed or whatever. So,
which is not small.
Oh yeah, it's and that was for the whole air wing.
Yeah.
I'd say a good part of it was we were fortunate to be able to mix it up with the MiG threat. That's what the fighters do. Here comes a strike group over the beach, going to a target, and so the fighters hang around protecting the bomber guys so they won't get.
How was the F-8 against the MiG-21? Is that what you were going?
Well, both 17s, 19s. There weren't as many 19s as there were 17s, and the 21, and it was good. And that brings up another point, Todd, which is a good point. The Vietnam War, as far as air-to-air goes, the fighters, it was kind of reminiscent of World War II. In other words, to shoot the guy, you had to get in back of him. Our Sidewinders that we had, heat-seeking missiles, were some of the early versions, Bravos and Deltas ultimately, finally. But they only shoot, in the truest sense, someplace in the aft.
Up the tailpipe, essentially.
Exactly. They're heat seekers. So
seeker head can pick it up.
Yeah. Plus, we had 4 20-millimeter guns, which our Navy Air Force had no guns. And ultimately, we had several engagements, and I happened to be on one of our A4 squadrons. Shot what probably is the first of the smart weapons. In other words, it was a TV guided bomb that had a little fins. You could sort of control it, but it was free falling. You could sort of steer it. This little TV camera in the nose of the bomb transmitted back to the A4. We had one of the first A4 squadrons to be able to use that weapon, and it was called the Walleye. So on May 19th, 1967, we were given the target, downtown Hanoi, which had been sort of off limits prior to this, but it was a thermal power plant in downtown Hanoi. Anyway, we go in. I was there were about 8 fighters, both our squadron and our sister squadron, and most of us were configured with 4 Sidewinders on rails on the side of the airplane. There were 3 or 4 of us that had Zunis, 5-inch rocket, plus 1 Sidewinder, 6 Zunis and 1 Sidewinder. Anyway, the idea was to suppress the flak so the A4 guys could make a smooth run, control their little, I say little weapon, but control the Walleye unharassed, if you will, by people shooting at it. Well, fortunately, I'm a survivor of it, but suppressing flak around the city of Hanoi was as futile as trying to open your canopy and pressurize the world.
Just too many weapons down there?
Useless, because they had several hundred guns plus surface-to-air missiles and on and on. We shot down 4 MiGs that day. Not myself, but we had 4 MiG kills, 2 guys from my squadron, 2 from my sister squadron. And so all to say, at the end of our cruise, and we got into it with the MiGs a couple of other different times, we meaning our air wing, had more MiG kills than the rest of the Navy combined.
Wow.
And that was, I think, Todd, the beginning of the Navy F4 people were saying, and there incidentally were twice as many F4s on the line, 3 carriers generally on the line all at once.
Mm-hmm.
And there were twice as many F4s as there were F8s. And the gods of the F4 community and the Navy itself are saying, now, why is that? Why are the F8s getting more kills than the F4s? And there's twice as many of them. We're flying to the same places, doing the same things. Anyway, that idea led to the eventual creation of Top Gun.
Mm-hmm.
Dan Pedersen wrote a book about, he was one of the core originators of the Top Gun school, Naval Fighter Weapons School, correctly what it's called. And he talks a little about that, but they went back. That's what Top Gun is really all about, is tactically, how do you do that? Prior to that, Dan, and not exclusively, but they, F4 has great radar, beautiful radar, shot the Sparrow missile, which was a beam rider, hypothetically back, at the end of the Cold War, in the mid 50s, late 50s. It's like, hey, we're going to lock on to the Russian bears coming into it 30 miles away. The guy locks them up, shoots the Sparrow, turn around, go home.
Fire and forget kind of thing. Yeah.
It was lesser of a emphasis, I think, on, hey, how do you get behind somebody and shoot them? The intercept geometry was one of the major things. Anyway, that led to the creation of Top Gun, which I'll make this mention now, but I'll mention it again. In the world of helicopters, which you know a lot about, in Vietnam, the dust-off guys had the same resistance from the Army headquarters and people that had flown a certain regiment, and no, the dust-off things won't work. And Patrick Brady, his book, I don't know if you've read it.
No.
Dead Men Flying. And I read it way after the fact here, but it is phenomenal, and it's all about the creation of dust off and the helicopters going in.
I completely understand, because I was an Air Force helicopter pilot, which is an oxymoron in itself. I had a general at the academy tell me, I didn't spend $500,000 for you to fly a helicopter. So I was a bastard child to begin with, but it's all good. So
it would be good to be able to talk to that general and say, General, what do you think of the Jolly Greens?
Exactly. Well, yeah.
And it's the resistance, it's the old axiom, Todd, years and years of tradition, unhampered by progress.
It's going to be a good day.
Morning, baby. Shipping beef this Monday. We do have a little bit left available here. Check us out, familyfarmbeefbox.com. Thanks. Have a good day.
And
good ideas. Well, we're seeing it today. I ended up flying on carriers in the Persian Gulf just at night on goggles. So I had some of the experience you're talking about, but
Sure.
fascinating.
And so that era for me, obviously in '67, then we came back and started workups again and deployed again. My second cruise was on the Hancock, which deployed out of Alameda in San Francisco there, and anyway left on another 8 or 9 month cruise, and that would have been 68, 69 time frame. And by that time, the intensity of the war had taken a little hiatus as we were beginning useless talks with the North Vietnamese and did a bombing halt that didn't work. And I just, it took, as you know, everybody knows now today, it was delaying the inevitable. Finally, our POWs came home, and in 72 or 3, and the war officially ended with our tail between our legs, and that ended in, I think, 75. We got a presidential unit commendation for my first cruise, and it hit home with me not until probably years later, when you sort of start seeing the obvious expending years of effort. More dramatic now to us, Todd, than was the fact back in the early '60s. Things that begin to bother, I think, most of us that were, maybe still are in some ways, pure military people. Hey, if you're going to risk the wad, and I'm willing to risk it, but don't fool around. Don't tell me we want to extend this. I mean, the idea of being in Afghanistan for 20 years and then leaving, what, 70, 60, 70 billion dollars worth of equipment, and we've done it in Iraq, and it's just something that is bothersome to you. And incidentally, your organization, which I was not overly familiar with, but one of the few people trying to sort it out as to what are we doing?
Yeah, I think it's obvious there are agendas that other people have that were not the best interests of the United States. Let's just put it at that.
Yes.
So,
anyway, I of course, we didn't know it at the time, but Kennedy wanted to get the heck out of Vietnam. We were dribbling in there, and he realized, well, this is going to be a quagmire. And again, what are we doing? And this hits home with people like myself, maybe yourself, and tons of other people. The idea that our own CIA, in all probability, with, I mean, proof in every direction, killed our own sitting president. That is abhorrent to me.
To every American.
Yes, it is. And yet, we're continuing on the road to doing things. The absurdity, back to the Vietnam thing, the creation of this competition between the Air Force and the Navy. This is primarily in North Vietnam, the sortie count. We were flying in weather on useless targets, useless, I mean, in every sense of the word, just to keep the sortie count sort of equal between the Air Force and the Navy. Anyway, and I'm jumping around here, I know, a little bit. I have a good memory, Todd. It's just short. But and again, certainly the Kennedy killing of our own sitting president is one thing, but back to the efforts that were being exerted, and over time, CIA was running the targeting in all of Vietnam, both North and South. And sometime after the war, and I'm not sure of the date of this, but it was essentially Secretary of State Dean Rusk was asked, because there was a rumor late in the Vietnam War that we were passing targeting information to the North Vietnamese the day before the strike. And this is a quote. It's been rumored that this is by a TV news person, and it was recorded, of course. It's been rumored that the United States provided the North Vietnamese government with the names of the targets that would be bombed the following day. Is there any truth to that allegation? And here's what he said. The former secretary responded, yes, we didn't want to harm the North Vietnamese people, so we passed the targets to the Swiss embassy in Washington with instructions to pass them on to the North Vietnamese government. Well, I have had handfuls of people that either were killed, some around the ship, some were shot down. I've got several friends who were POWs for 6 years. Incidentally, on that May 19th raid, we lost 2 people, one of which was my squadron mate. And he sat in prison for 6 years thereafter. So if you think about that, the definition of treason is in fact, it's the only crime that's defined in our Constitution, the only crime. And it says, in essence, the only crime in the Constitution is the act of waging war against the United States or materially aiding its enemies. Well, if passing target information to what was thought to be our enemy the day before the strike, well, that's a pure definition, materially aiding the enemy, and therefore that's treason. Now, here we are, 57 years later, or thereabouts for me. And that's just a lost.
Well, it's still going on, Captain. I mean, it's, it's obvious to me that they did not want to defeat our enemies. They just wanted the war to continue.
Yes.
So,
the military-industrial complex, whatever encompassing, all encompassing that is, combined with a lot of other problems. And I know you're involved in it, Todd, thankfully involved, is how do we either bring those past transgressions to the surface, but the media is complicit, certainly, and every day I'm sure you fight the whole idea of being able to try to decipher the truth, whatever that is, and bring that out so people can define it. But and I'm still a damn born optimist.
Yeah.
And I read prolifically, and I see evidence all over the place that, in spite of all of the things we're able to prove and or get enough evidence to say, that was, if it's walking like a duck and looks like a duck, you know what? It probably is a duck.
Right.
So that's, I spent 25 years, part of which was in the reserves, all at Miramar, and flying F-8s. We ultimately got F-4s. They stood up 2 air wings that were identical to the U.S. Navy air wings, in this case, A7 squadrons, A6 squadrons, 2 fighter squadrons, Qualled, and we're really ready to go. And you know what? The Navy has essentially disbanded that whole reserve concept. Now, it still exists in various categories. And it was a hell of a good idea. And they stood it up, and I was involved in the very first part of the new concept of the reserves, and it worked slick. Just coincidentally, in that thing, we created the first reserve fighter squadron at Miramar again, and the composition, Todd, of our squadron was just to get into the squadron. Of course, a reputation precedes you, whether you wanted to or not, but you had to have a good reputation, certainly. In our case, be current in the fighters that were flying at the time, have 1,000 hours in type, preferably be a lieutenant or maybe even a lieutenant commander, but not super senior. And thirdly, having been what we call a RAG instructor, meaning we instructed in the airplanes we were then flying for the regular Navy. And we had a squadron that would have been the ideal of any commanding officer in the world. Like all of our people had 1,000 hours. We had a few MiG killers with us, and been obviously through Vietnam, and it was a perfect solution. As a result, we won every competition. We competed with the regular Navy. We were the only reserve units at Miramar, and I'm just talking fighters now, but the attack guys had the same thing. It was the best of the best of the best, and ultimately we got F4s and then F14s. I didn't fly the F14, but it was fantastic era.
Yeah, the golden age.
Yeah, it was. So, to end on I shouldn't say end necessarily, but the world of aircraft carriers, and incidentally, I was just at Tailhook here last August, September, for the first Tailhook I've been to in probably 25 years, and amazed to see all the new guys, and they're flying F-35s and F-22s, and we went up to Fallon, which is now the place where Top Gun school resides, all at Fallon. There's a lot going on in Fallon. You know, the Navy gave Miramar to the Marine Corps. And so it's now Marine Corps Air Station Miramar. So everything moved up to Fallon, which is out in the middle of the desert there, east of Reno. And we had a grand tour on the Tailhook. A bunch of us went out there, and they really treated us exceptionally well. But talking about the current state of Top Gun school, the Naval Fighter Weapons School, and airplanes all over the place, the aggressor squadrons that reside there too, F-35s, F-22s, F-18s, etc. And I and others asked the questions, and it's not confidential at all, but say, well, on this F-35, there's a squadron of them sitting out on the ramp there. And I said, well, what's the availability rate on any given day? About 40%. So I'm thinking, say you had a 10 airplane squadron, you got 4 that are up and flying. And the thought that ran through my little brain was, at $100+ million each.
Yeah.
We have 6 of those 10 airplanes awaiting parts or something like that.
Right.
And the Air Force equally as stupid in my world.
Unready for combat. Yeah.
Unready for combat, wanting to take the A-10 and park it out in the desert someplace and get something new. I've never flown the A-10, but what I think about is what a perfect airplane for the mission it was designed for.
Yes.
And here the Air Force is saying, no, we want that's too old, and we want to completely get something better or replace it with whatever it is.
Which again is the best for the military industrial complex, but not for the Air Force or for the ground pounder on the ground.
Big time.
Because the A-10 is something they loved to see in the air above them, believe me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't know, Todd, what from your end do you see? What do you see as with your Armed Forces Press organization, good writers? I'm sure you're on the road like you are most of the time.
Sure.
Do you see a little light?
I think there is hope, but everybody has to be completely 24/7, commit your life to the fight to save the Republic, even if you're 80. Because you have to find a way to get in the fight. And there's a lot of ways, either it's local school board, local church, whatever, get involved. And yes, I see hope, but it's going to take more of the American people waking up and demanding, not accepting what's happening.
Sure. And I still am able, thankfully, to read, and I read prolifically about the state of the state. What are we doing? And to know what the opposition is doing, and is doing it very effectively, and that is propaganda. Propaganda by itself is not a totally bad word, but the execution of falsifying whatever the mission is for somebody, it's Todd, I think overwhelming. And we're talking worldwide propaganda. And again, like I ask frequently, who's driving the bus here?
Yeah.
And it's sort of like a water witching stick. The stick always and probably in 95% of the cases points at the CIA as a runaway freight train of doing whatever they want. They don't pay attention to Congress nor the presidents. And if the presidents are, I think in many cases, I say just presidents, but senators, congressmen are literally afraid to really mount a major campaign that cites singularly the CIA as, or NSA or other groups. And I happen to have a degree in journalism a long time ago, but the point was you can write anything and slant it any way you want to. And I think the CIA has legions of writers, media organizations that they are using to.
Well, I think the saving grace may be that they've gotten too greedy, and the mask is off now. So the American people know what's going to happen is another story, but the mask is off. We know what they're doing now, where it wasn't the case for me even 4 years ago or 5 years ago. So I think a lot of people are tired of it. So we'll see. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do see some hope down the pike.
Well, I'm for one exceptionally happy to hear that, Todd, and you're right in it. You're right in the middle of the boiling pot and trying to counter what is a huge problem, and even worldwide. We may be up against, and I say an enemy, but people who want to change it to suit their ideals and their agendas, really. And we're pouring money still into, as a residual way, Afghanistan. We're sending over efforts to support some group who's trying to counter the Taliban, and now we're thinking about building a dock to
in Gaza. Yeah.
in Gaza. And the dock that we're sending over there is one of the last docks we have on hand.
There's a reason for that.
Yeah, I'm sure the blackboard could be full, Todd, of, hey, here's what's wrong here, and here's what's wrong there, and on and on. But after a while, and I'm sure like yourself and your organization, you kind of wonder, well, yeah, we can identify the problems. What the heck are the solutions?
I call it the disease and the symptoms. All of those are symptoms of the disease, which is an illegitimate government, essentially.
Yes.
So that's the disease that has to be cured.
Sure. One, and this may bring a smile to our faces in spite of the gloom and the doom out there, which is prolific, but someone tried to describe night carrier landings. And I don't know if you've heard this before, but it's been around a little bit, particularly in Navy circles. But here's what and this is very short, but the three best things in life are a good landing, a good orgasm, and a good bowel movement. The night carrier landing is one of the few opportunities in life where you get to experience all three at the same time. So, and that, in spite of being funny, it's damn near the truth.
Yeah.
Particularly in bad weather, and assuming you land successfully, you can extract yourself from the airplane and walk back to the ready room.
Captain, thank you very much. You had something else you wanted to add?
No, I think that's it. Todd, we could talk for a long time. And there's more stories, certainly. And the people today, what am I, 82-ish? And other people my age are equally as concerned, I think. And now we're getting to the point where we're having to the point in our lives where, hey, listen, and one of the things that General Hollingsworth mentioned, and I would certainly want to mention it too, is those of us that are married and have been, in my case, 63 years worth with this chick that I married in college in my sophomore year. The women that have endured almost any military person and their lives and raised a family and did all the other things, that is such a big chunk of our being. They need to be thanked prolifically and be thanked every day for their support while we're off doing other things. So
completely agree. It takes a special breed. So
it sure does.
I agree. Well, thank you, sir. If you think of someone else who we should have on, let us know, and we'll love to have you back if you got more stories down the road.
All right. I will do it, Todd. And thank you for the opportunity to talk with you. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Take care, sir. Take care. Hope you enjoyed the SCIF, our Memorial Day special. Please, if you have time, take your kids to a Memorial Day service somewhere in your local jurisdiction. They're out there. You just got to probably search and find them. It's a great experience for young kids. Anyway, we'll be back on the SCIF tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern.
Monday through Friday. And we have some great guests tomorrow already lining them up. So make sure you check us tomorrow. Thank you again for joining us today, and we'll see you tomorrow on the SCIF.